The world of the 1930s was a landscape of daring dreams and fragile progress. Airplanes, still new to most eyes, were the symbols of a coming future, machines that dared to lift humankind above its limits. To fly was to defy gravity and to flirt with destiny itself. And in that sky of roaring propellers and trembling wings, one woman became the face of courage itself, Amelia Earhart. By 1937, Amelia was more than just a pilot. She was a global icon, a symbol of independence, adventure, and the unshakable belief that limits existed only to be broken. She had already flown across the Atlantic, solo, making her the first woman in history to do so. Newspapers called her Lady Lindy, after Charles Lindbergh, but many saw in her something even greater, a pioneer for women, a symbol of modernity. On the morning of July 2, 1937, the Pacific Ocean was calm, the air heavy with heat. A twin-engined Lockheed Model 10E Electra, silver and sleek, stood waiting at Lae, New Guinea. Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, were preparing for the most dangerous leg of their world flight, a 2,556-mile journey to Howland Island, a speck of land barely 2 miles long, halfway between Australia and Hawaii. It was meant to be one more triumph in a journey that had already made headlines around the world. But that day, the sky that had always embraced Amelia Earhart would not return her. The story of Amelia Earhart's disappearance is not just a mystery, it is one of the 20th century's most enduring enigmas. It's a story of technology pushed to its limits, of human courage against nature's vastness, and of the haunting silence that followed when the radios stopped. To understand what happened, we must first step back into a world teetering between old and new, an age when aviation was both art and experiment, and when the name Earhart stood for everything the future promised. In 1937, the United States was still climbing out of the Great Depression, but in the skies, hope soared. Air travel was the cutting edge of science and national pride. The Wright brothers had flown just 30 years earlier, yet already flight paths crossed continents. Pilots were celebrities, adventurers, and test subjects all at once. Amelia Earhart's fascination with flying began a decade earlier. Born in Atchison, Kansas in 1897, she had always been a child with a restless mind. In her childhood scrapbook, she kept newspaper clippings about successful women, lawyers, engineers, explorers, long before she ever saw an airplane up close. When she finally did, at an air show in 1920, she paid $10 for a short flight. The moment the plane left the ground, she would later say, I knew I had to fly. Within months, she began lessons with Netta Snook, one of America's first female flight instructors. By 1922, Amelia bought her own plane, a bright yellow Kinner Airster, nicknamed the Canary. She soon set her first record, the highest altitude flown by a woman, 14,000 feet. In an era when women were expected to stay grounded, Amelia took to the sky. Her fame skyrocketed after 1928, when she became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, though that time she was only a passenger. Even so, the flight made her a sensation. Reporters clamored for interviews. President Calvin Coolidge sent congratulations. But Amelia was uneasy with fame earned through others' piloting. She was just baggage, she admitted. Determined to prove herself, she set out to do it solo. In 1932, she did the impossible, flying alone across the Atlantic, from Newfoundland to Ireland, through storms, icing, and exhaustion. The feat made her a hero. Honors poured in, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the National Geographic Society's gold medal, and the admiration of millions. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Queen of the Air conquers the Atlantic." But Amelia was not chasing glory. She was chasing meaning. She used her fame to advocate for women's rights, writing books, giving lectures, and mentoring young female pilots. She helped found the 99s, an international organization for women aviators. She said, "Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be a challenge to others." Her husband, George Palmer Putnam, was her publisher and publicist, a complex relationship of love and strategy. Together, they shaped Amelia's public image, confident, intelligent, adventurous, yet approachable. To a world longing for heroes, she seemed fearless. But privately, she knew the risks. "Courage," she wrote in her diary, "is the price that life exacts for granting peace." By 1936, Amelia had a new dream: to fly around the world along the equator, the longest possible route, a journey of 29,000 miles. It would be the ultimate test of endurance, navigation, and aviation technology. The plan drew massive public attention. The U.S. government, the National Geographic Society, and Purdue University, where Amelia was a visiting faculty member, all supported it. She told reporters, "This is not just a flight, it's a step toward the future of flight itself." In March 1937, she made her first attempt, flying westward from California to Hawaii. But after a rough landing in Hawaii, the plane was damaged, forcing repairs. Undeterred, she tried again in June, this time eastward, Florida to South America, then across Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. At every stop, she was greeted by crowds, school children, reporters. Her words were always calm, humble. "I'm just flying a little further each day." By late June, she and Noonan had reached Les Nubini. Only 7,000 miles remained, most of it over the Pacific. Howland Island was their next destination, a U.S. Navy airfield project, a narrow strip of coral in the middle of the ocean. The plan was simple in theory. Amelia would navigate by radio, keeping contact with the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed near Howland Island, to guide her. But execution would prove far more complicated. Fred Noonan, her navigator, was skilled but reliant on celestial navigation, using the stars and sun. Over open ocean with no landmarks and unpredictable weather, even a small error could mean missing the island entirely. On the night of July 1st, they prepared for takeoff. Amelia sent a last message to her husband. "Radio equipment okay, all set for tomorrow's flight." The next morning, July 2nd, at 10 a.m. local time, they took off. Witnesses said the plane lifted smoothly, climbing into the eastern sky until it became a glint of silver and was gone. They were never seen again. In the hours that followed, radio operators across the Pacific strained to catch their signals. The Itasca received faint transmissions, frustratingly broken. "We must be on you," one message said, "but cannot see you." Later, "We are running north and south." Then silence. No one realized that history was shifting into legend. As the sun set over the Pacific, the world's most famous pilot had vanished into a silence that would last nearly a century.
When the name Amelia Earhart began appearing in newspapers in the late 1920s, America was searching for hope. The Great Depression was tightening its grip. Unemployment was rising, and the collective dream of progress seemed to dim with every passing day. Yet among the headlines of bank failures and breadlines came stories of a young woman who dared to rise above it all. Literally. Amelia wasn't born into privilege. Her journey from a small-town Kansas girl to a global aviation icon was built on determination, intellect, and a subtle defiance of societal boundaries. In a world where women were told their place was in the home, she found hers in the clouds. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on July 24, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas. Her father, Edwin Earhart, was a railroad claims officer, and her mother, Amy, was from a wealthy family. But Amelia's upbringing was far from stable. Her father's alcoholism and career troubles kept the family moving constantly. Des Moines, Kansas City, Chicago. Amid instability, young Amelia learned resilience. She was not a conventional girl of her era. She climbed trees, collected insects, and loved rough-and-tumble play. In her school report cards, teachers noted her curiosity, but also her independence. She refused to wear dresses if she didn't want to. When girls were being taught etiquette, Amelia was reading about great explorers like Robert Peary and Frederick Cook. During World War I, she trained as a nurse's aide in Toronto, caring for wounded soldiers. The sight of injured pilots sparked her interest in aviation, though she didn't fly until 1920. After that first flight, there was no turning back. As soon as I left the ground, she said later, I knew I myself had to fly. The 1920s and 1930s are often called the golden age of aviation. The skies had become the new frontier, and pilots were its cowboys and pioneers. Air races, record attempts, and stunts captured the public imagination. Men like Charles Lindbergh, who flew solo across the Atlantic in 1927, were treated like gods. But women were expected to applaud from the sidelines. Amelia Earhart refused that role. She learned to fly at a time when there were fewer than a dozen licensed female pilots in the United States. Her first instructor, Netta Snook, later recalled Amelia's quiet confidence. She didn't talk much, Snook said, but she had that look in her eyes. You knew she wasn't afraid of anything. Amelia's first airplane, the Canary, became her partner in ambition. She worked odd jobs, filing papers, photographing, even driving trucks to afford flight time and repairs. In 1922, she set a women's altitude record, flying to 14,000 feet. That record caught the attention of the press, and soon the aviation world knew her name. But fame came truly calling in 1928, when publisher George Palmer Putnam, a man with an eye for heroes, sought a woman to accompany pilot Wilmer Stultz across the Atlantic. The flight was to be a publicity event, but it would make history, the first transatlantic flight by a woman. Amelia agreed, though she made it clear she was not content to be a passenger forever. On June 18, 1928, their plane Friendship took off from Newfoundland and landed in Wales 21 hours later. The world erupted with excitement. Amelia was celebrated at the White House, paraded in New York City, and featured on magazine covers. Yet she told reporters, Stultz did all the flying, I was just baggage. That humility and her promise to return as a pilot made her all the more beloved. Public adoration could have consumed her, but Amelia saw fame as a tool. With George Putnam's guidance, she published books, signed endorsement deals, and embarked on lecture tours. She became the face of progress, featured in advertisements for luggage, cigarettes, and automobiles. But behind the glamour was a calculated mission to make women's accomplishments visible. In 1929, she helped organize the Women's Air Derby, a cross-country air race for female pilots, later nicknamed the Powder Puff Derby by a dismissive press. The name annoyed her, but she participated anyway, and used the attention to campaign for equal recognition in aviation. That same year, she helped found the 99s, a network for women pilots that still exists today. The most effective way to do it, she said, is to do it. Her presence was transformative. She wasn't loud or radical. She didn't shout for equality, she embodied it. She wore trousers when few women dared, cut her hair short, and spoke to the media in a direct, intelligent tone. To the average American, she was relatable, yet revolutionary. A modern woman who achieved greatness without losing grace. Amelia's marriage to George Putnam in 1931 was not a typical romance of the era. Before their wedding, she wrote him a letter describing her fears of losing independence. "You must know again my reluctance to marry, my feeling that I shatter thereby chances in work which means most to me. I shall not hold you to any medieval code of faithfulness to me, nor will I consider myself bound to you similarly." It was a shocking declaration for its time, but George accepted her terms. Their union became a partnership, half love story, half publicity machine. He managed her image, arranged speaking tours, and coordinated logistics for her record attempts. Some critics accused him of exploiting her fame, but George's belief in Amelia's mission was genuine. He often said she was the bravest person he ever knew. Together, they built the Earhart brand, a blend of intellect, adventure, and elegance. Amelia appeared in Vogue, wrote for Cosmopolitan, and advised the U.S. military on flight safety. She even worked as a career counselor at Purdue University, encouraging women to enter scientific and technical fields. "The woman who can create her own job is the woman who will win," she told her students. Amelia's flights were more than simply breaking records. She studied weather charts, navigation, and engine mechanics with meticulous care. But she also described flying as poetry in motion. Her writings reveal a deep philosophical side. In one essay she wrote, "You haven't seen a tree until you've seen its shadow from the sky." That duality, precision, and poetry made her unique among pilots. She believed aviation wasn't just about breaking records, but about expanding human potential. She dreamed of a day when everyone, not just the rich or daring, could fly. "Someday," she said, "people will think nothing of boarding an airplane as they do a train." Her every flight pushed the limits of that dream. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. In 1935, she flew from Honolulu to Oakland, California. Another first. Each record brought both acclaim and controversy. Male aviators sometimes dismissed her as a media creation, but her technical skills silenced most critics. "Amelia Earhart," wrote one aviation journalist, "flies with her head, not her publicity." Despite her calm demeanor, Amelia was acutely aware of aviation's risks. Her friends were dying in crashes with grim regularity. "Flying may not be all plain sailing," she once quipped, "but the fun of it is worth the price." Her husband worried constantly, but Amelia seemed at peace with risk. "Courage is the price life exacts for granting peace," she wrote in her final letter before her last flight. Her commitment to pushing boundaries grew with each success. In 1936, when she unveiled her new plane, the Lockheed Electra 10E, reporters called it the Flying Laboratory. The Electra's sleek design and advanced radio system represented the cutting edge of aviation technology. Amelia's goal was now no longer just to prove herself. It was to chart new paths for future pilots. Her planned circumnavigation would make her not just the first woman to fly around the world, but the first person to do so along the equator, a feat of immense navigational complexity. The flight was ambitious, risky, and symbolic. It was a statement that human courage and innovation could conquer even the vast Pacific. By early 1937, the world was watching. Newspapers followed her every movement. Schools tracked her route on classroom maps. In a time before satellites or GPS, every mile she flew was an act of faith. Even the U.S. government offered limited support, setting up radio relays and ships along her path.
When the Electra took off from Oakland on March 17, 1937, cheers erupted from the crowd. But destiny would not make it easy. A landing mishap in Hawaii damaged the plane and forced the mission's suspension. For 2 months, repairs and redesigns delayed her. Undeterred, she reversed her route, this time flying eastward.
Her second attempt began on June 1, 1937, from Miami. Over the next month, she crossed South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. At every stop, her calm charm captivated people. Children handed her flowers, dignitaries praised her courage. To the press, she said only, "We're just flying a little farther each day." By late June, Amelia and her navigator Fred Noonan reached Lae, New Guinea. The journey's end seemed within reach. Only the vast Pacific remained, a 7,000-mile stretch dotted with tiny islands and uncertainty. The world did not know it was watching history's final chapter unfold.